Rain lashed against the kitchen window, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. "Mom, we need to talk about your living situation," Marcus said, his voice tight with false concern. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, a manila folder clutched in his hand like a weapon. I knew what this was about. He'd been circling for months, ever since Eleanor's engagement to Julian. Julian, a successful lawyer, had clearly rattled Marcus, who'd always seen himself as the golden child, the provider, even though he'd barely held down a steady job for the past 5 years. "This house is too much for you to handle," he continued, his gaze flitting around the room, as if already calculating its worth. "It's time you downsized, Mom." I sipped my tea, my hand remarkably steady. "This house," I said, placing my cup down with a deliberate click, "is my home. It's where I raised you and Eleanor. Things change," he snapped, pushing the folder across the table towards me. "Eleanor's getting married, starting her own family. You rattling around in this big place alone, it just doesn't make sense." He opened the folder, revealing a glossy brochure of a retirement community. Palm trees swayed in the digitally enhanced breeze, a stark contrast to the gray drizzle outside my window. "Look," he said, pointing to a picture of smiling seniors playing shuffleboard. "This place is lovely. Activities, social life, it's perfect for someone your age." His words, dripping with condescension, hit me like a slap. "My age," I repeated, my voice rising. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." He sighed dramatically. "Mom, you're being difficult. The upkeep on this house is expensive. Property taxes, repairs, it's a burden." He leaned forward, his voice softening, but his eyes held a glint of something cold and calculating. "Eleanor and Julian are worried about you. They think this would be best." I knew that was a lie. Eleanor had called just yesterday, excited about the wedding plans, chattering about floral arrangements and venue options. Not once had she mentioned my living situation. "Don't bring Eleanor into this," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "She's busy planning her wedding. I won't have you upsetting her with this nonsense." "This isn't nonsense, Mom," Marcus insisted, his voice hardening again. He pulled a document from the folder, a legal-looking form filled with dense text. "This is a proposal. We've found a buyer who's willing to offer a fair price for the house. All you need to do is sign." I pushed the document back across the table. "I'm not selling my house, Marcus." End of discussion. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back against the floor with a loud thud. "You can't be serious," he said, his face flushed with anger. "This house is practically falling apart. You can't afford to maintain it." "I can manage my own finances," I replied, standing my ground. The audacity of him, questioning my ability to manage my own life in my own home, it made my blood boil. "Fine," he spat, his voice laced with venom. "If you won't do this the easy way, we'll have to do it the hard way. I'll get a lawyer involved. We can have you declared incompetent. Then we'll sell the house, whether you like it or not." He snatched the folder from the table and stormed towards the door. "Get out," I said, my voice low and trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "Get out of my house." He paused at the doorway, his back to me. "You'll regret this," he muttered before slamming the door behind him. I stood there for a moment, the silence broken only by the relentless drumming of the rain. My legs felt weak, and I sank back into my chair, the untouched tea growing cold in my cup. Regret. He was the one who would regret this. He thought he knew everything about my finances, about my life. He thought I was a frail old woman, clinging to the past. He had no idea. He didn't know about the accounts, the investments I'd carefully cultivated over the years, shielded from his prying eyes. He didn't know about the safety net I had meticulously woven, a secret shield against the storms of life, and certainly against greedy, opportunistic sons. He thought he could bully me, force me out of my home. He had underestimated me, and he would pay for it. The rain continued to fall, washing away the residue of his anger, leaving behind a chilling stillness, a quiet resolve. I reached for the phone, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. It was time to make a few calls. Rain lashed against the kitchen window, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Tuesday morning, late October. If you're not competent to make these kinds of decisions anymore, there are legal options, Marcus said, his voice flat, devoid of the warmth I remembered from his childhood. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, a cup of my good china clutched in his hand, the steam rising like a mocking specter. I stared at him, my own cup untouched, the tea growing cold. Legal options, I repeated, the words catching in my throat. What are you talking about? He sighed, a theatrical display of patience. Mom, we've been over this. Eleanor and Julian need a bigger place. Julian's business is expanding. They need this house. He gestured vaguely around the room, encompassing the space I'd carefully nurtured for decades. The hand-painted tiles above the stove, the worn but comfortable chairs, the photographs of Eleanor as a child, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, all dismissed with a flick of his wrist. And I need a roof over my head, I retorted, my voice sharper than I intended. This is my home. It's too much house for one person, he countered, his tone condescending. It's not practical. You could downsize, get a nice little condo. We'd even help you find a place. Help me, I laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. You want to force me out of my home, and you call it helping. Marcus took a slow sip of his tea, his eyes never leaving mine. Mom, he said, his voice softer now, almost wheedling. We're worried about you. This place is too much for you to manage. The garden, the upkeep, it's a burden. A burden I've managed perfectly well for the past 20 years, I said, my hands tightening around my mug. Since your father passed, the mention of his name hung in the air between us, a silent reproach. Things change, Marcus said, avoiding my gaze. You're not getting any younger. Then spoken accusation hung heavy in the air. He thought I was too old, too feeble to care for myself, too senile to make my own decisions. The thought stung, a sharp, visceral pain. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. Are you? He raised an eyebrow, a subtle challenge. The bills are piling up, Mom. The garden's overgrown. You haven't even bothered to fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom. He listed my perceived failings like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Each point, however minor, felt like a blow. Those are minor things, I argued, waving my hand dismissively. I'll get to them. When? He pressed. When you're too frail to even walk up the stairs. When you fall and break a hip because you can't manage the garden anymore. His words, though cruel, struck a chord of fear within me. I was getting older. Things that were once easy were becoming more challenging. But I wasn't incompetent. I wasn't ready to be shunted off to some sterile condo, to be stripped of my independence, of my memories. I'm not giving up my home, I said, my voice low and firm. Marcus leaned forward, his expression hardening. Well, if you're not willing to cooperate, we'll have to consider other options. We can have you evaluated. If a doctor deems you unfit to manage your own affairs, he let the sentence hang in the air, the implication clear. He would have me declared incompetent. He would take my home, my memories, my life, my own son. The thought was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. The rain continued to batter the window, the wind howling like a mournful cry. I looked at Marcus, at the hard glint in his eyes, and knew there was no reasoning with him. He wouldn't listen. He wouldn't understand. He wanted what he wanted, and he would stop at nothing to get it. Get out, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at me, surprised. What? Get out of my house, I repeated, my voice stronger now, fueled by a sudden surge of anger. You have no right to speak to me like this. You have no right to threaten me. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor, the sound grating on my nerves. You'll regret this, he said, his voice tight with anger. You'll see. He turned and walked out, slamming the kitchen door behind him. The sound echoed through the house, a final punctuation mark on his cruel pronouncements. I sat there, alone in the silence, the remnants of his threat swirling around me like the storm outside. Regret, no, fear, perhaps. But more than that, a quiet resolve began to form within me. He wanted a fight, fine. He would get one. He thought I was a frail old woman, easily manipulated, easily dismissed. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. I wouldn't let him take my home. I wouldn't let him steal my life. I had worked too hard, fought too long, to surrender now. I had resources he didn't know about, tucked away, waiting for a rainy day. And this, I realized, was the perfect storm. Rain lashed against the kitchen window, blurring the already gray October morning. You leave me no choice, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. I could petition the court for guardianship, have you declared mentally incompetent. My own son, threatening to strip me of my independence, of my home, all for a bit of brick and mortar. I gripped the edge of the kitchen table, the wood cold and smooth under my trembling fingers. You wouldn't dare, I breathed, the words catching in my throat. He shrugged, a casual movement that belied the cruelty in his eyes. Wouldn't I? It's not like you're using your full mental capacity these days. Forgetting things, getting confused, he let the implication hang in the air, thick and suffocating. A judge might agree with me. It's for your own good, Mom. He said Mom with such false concern it made my stomach churn. My own good, I repeated, the words laced with disbelief. My good is living in my own house, surrounded by my own things, my own memories. I looked around the kitchen, at the worn linoleum floor, the faded curtains, the chipped mugs hanging on their hooks. Every inch of this house held a story, a piece of my life. He wanted to rip it all away from me, This house is too much for you to handle, Marcus insisted, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. Let Eleanor and Julian help you find a nice, manageable apartment. Somewhere closer to them. Think of it as a fresh start. He reached across the table, his hand hovering over mine. I flinched and pulled away. Eleanor and Julian have nothing to do with this, I snapped. This is between you and me. I knew Eleanor would never condone this. Not really. She loved this house as much as I did, spending summers here as a child, baking cookies with me in this very kitchen. They're worried about you, Mom, Marcus said, his voice softer now. They just want what's best for you. He sighed dramatically. This place is falling apart. The roof needs repairs. The garden's overgrown. The plumbing, he ticked off the list of imagined flaws, as if reciting a grocery list. I can manage, I said, my voice firm. I've managed perfectly well for years. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor, and I intend to keep managing. I walked to the window, staring out at the relentless rain. This is my house, Marcus. I'm not selling. He followed me, his shadow falling across the floor. Don't be stubborn, Mom. This is for your own good. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip surprisingly tight. You're not thinking clearly. Let me help you. I shook his hand off, my heart pounding. Get out, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, his eyes narrowed. You'll regret this, he said, his voice dripping with menace. Get out. I repeated, my voice stronger now. And don't come back until you're ready to treat me with respect. He stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the quiet house. I leaned against the window, my legs shaking. He thought he could intimidate me, bully me into giving up my home. He thought he knew me. He had no idea. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. He didn't know about the money. The money my husband had left me, tucked away safely, waiting for a rainy day. A rainy day like this. Marcus thought he was so clever, so entitled. He thought he could just waltz in and take what he wanted. He was wrong. This house was mine, and I would fight for it. I walked over to the phone, my hand hovering over the receiver. There was a lawyer I needed to call, a specialist in estate planning, someone who could help me protect what was mine, someone who could help me put an end to Marcus's schemes once and for all. The rain continued to beat against the windows, a relentless drumming that mirrored the resolve growing within me. He wanted a fight. He'd get one. He just didn't know what kind of fight he was in for. He underestimated me. He underestimated the lengths a mother would go to protect her home, her independence, her dignity. He would learn. He would learn soon enough. The phone felt cold and heavy in my hand. I dialed the number, a small smile playing on my lips. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. This was just the beginning. Rain lashed against the kitchen window, mirroring the storm raging inside me. Marcus stood there, his jaw tight, a cruel glint in his eyes. This house is going to be sold one way or another, he hissed, his voice dripping with a venom I never thought I'd hear from my own son. You're not capable of managing it anymore. I gripped the edge of the countertop, my knuckles white. This is my home, Marcus. I'm not selling. He scoffed, pulling a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. I've already spoken to a lawyer, he said, unfolding it with a flourish. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. I snatched the paper from his hand, my heart pounding. It was a letter from a lawyer, outlining the process of declaring someone mentally incompetent. My own son, threatening to have me declared unfit to manage my own affairs, to steal my home out from under me. You wouldn't, I whispered, my voice choked with disbelief. He simply shrugged. I'm doing this for your own good, Mom. You need to be in a place where you can be properly cared for. The rain outside intensified, the wind howling like a banshee. I felt a chill crawl down my spine, despite the warmth of the kitchen. Get out, I said, my voice trembling but firm. Get out of my house, he smirked, a condescending look that made my blood boil. Think about it, Mom. You don't have much time. He turned and walked out, leaving the lawyer's letter on the counter, a stark reminder of his betrayal. I stood there, staring at the closing door, the silence of the house suddenly deafening. The only sound was the relentless drumming of the rain, a somber soundtrack to my despair. I picked up the letter, the paper crinkling in my trembling hands. The words swam before my eyes, a blur of legalese and threats. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me, and I grabbed onto a chair for support. How could he do this to me after everything I'd done for him? All the sacrifices I'd made. I sank into the chair, the letter falling to the floor. The kitchen, once a place of warmth and family meals, now felt cold and empty. The rain continued its relentless assault, each drop a tiny hammer blow against my already fractured heart. I closed my eyes, trying to gather my thoughts. I needed to think clearly. I needed a plan. I couldn't let him win. I couldn't let him take my home, the place where I'd raised him, where I'd built my life. I remembered a conversation with Eleanor months ago. She'd mentioned Julian's work as a financial advisor, how he helped people manage their assets. Maybe, just maybe, he could help me. I opened my eyes, a glimmer of hope flickering in the darkness. I reached for the phone, my hand still shaking. I dialed Eleanor's number, praying she would answer. "Eleanor, darling," I said when she picked up, my voice still trembling slightly. "I need to talk to you and Julian. It's important." She agreed to come over later that evening. As I hung up the phone, a flicker of resolve began to burn within me. I wouldn't let Marcus win. I would fight back. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, the lawyer's letter a constant presence in my mind. I went through the motions of making a cup of tea, but I couldn't bring myself to drink it. I wandered from room to room, touching familiar objects, memories of happier times washing over me. A framed photo of Eleanor as a child, her bright smile radiating pure joy. A hand-wear-upon blanket draped over the sofa, a reminder of cozy evenings spent with family. Each object, each memory, fueled my resolve. As evening approached, the rain finally subsided, leaving a stillness in the air that felt almost ominous. I heard a car pull up outside, and moments later, Eleanor and Julian were at the door. "Mom, what's wrong?" Eleanor asked, her eyes filled with concern. I led them into the living room, my heart pounding. "I need your help," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus is trying to take my house." I showed them the lawyer's letter, explaining what had happened. Julian read the letter carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This is serious," he said, looking at me with a mixture of sympathy and concern. "But it's not insurmountable." He went on to explain the legal process, the steps Marcus would have to take, and the ways we could fight back. As Julian spoke, a sense of calm began to settle over me. I wasn't alone in this. I had Eleanor and Julian, and I knew they would do everything they could to help me. "There's something else," I said, hesitantly. "Something I haven't told anyone." I took a deep breath and revealed a secret I had kept hidden for years, a secret that could change everything, a secret about my finances, about investments I had made years ago, investments that had grown far beyond what anyone, including Marcus, could imagine. I had more than enough resources to fight back, to protect my home, and to ensure my independence. Eleanor and Julian were stunned into silence. I could see the surprise, and perhaps a touch of awe, in their eyes. A small smile played on my lips. The game, it seemed, was about to change. The Tuesday evening shadows stretched across my living room, the same room where I'd rocked Marcus to sleep, bandaged his scraped knees, and celebrated his meager achievements with over-the-top enthusiasm. Now, the silence felt heavy, tainted by his recent betrayal. How could he, my own flesh and blood, threaten to take my home? "You're getting too old to manage this place, Mom," he'd sneered. "It's time for you to move into assisted living." His words echoed in my mind, sharp and cruel. He hadn't even bothered to disguise his greed, barely mentioning Eleanor or Julian, focusing only on the potential value of the property. "Think of it as an investment for Eleanor and Julian's future," he'd added, a thin veil over his true intentions. He claimed he was worried about me, about my declining health, but his eyes, cold and calculating, told a different story. I traced the outline of a faded photograph on the end table. It was a picture of Marcus as a boy, beaming with pride after winning a school science fair. I'd worked double shifts at the diner to buy him the supplies for that volcano, sacrificing my own comfort so he could pursue his dreams. "I always put you first, Marcus," I whispered to the empty room, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I gave you everything I had. And now this was how he repaid me, trying to force me out of my home, the only place that held any real memories of a life well lived, a life dedicated to my children. He seemed to think I was senile, easily manipulated. "Sign the papers, Mom," he'd urged, pushing a thick document across the table. "It's for the best." But I'd seen that glint of avarice in his eyes, the same look he'd get when he'd covet his sister Eleanor's toys as a child. I refused, of course. "This house is my home, Marcus," I'd told him, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm not going anywhere." He'd left in a huff, muttering threats about legal action, about having me declared incompetent. He underestimated me. He assumed I was a frail old woman, clinging to outdated notions of sentimentality. He didn't realize I still had some fight left in me. He certainly didn't know about the safe deposit box, the one I'd kept hidden for decades, a contingency plan for a rainy day I'd always hoped wouldn't come. It held more than enough to fight his petty legal battles, to secure the best lawyers, to expose his scheme for what it truly was. He thought he was so clever, preying on his own mother. "You'll regret this, Mom," He'd spat as he slammed the door behind him. Little did he know, regret was a dish best served cold, and I was just starting to prepare the ingredients. I picked up the phone, my hand surprisingly steady. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, the number of a sharp, ruthless lawyer known for her tenacity and discretion. "Hello, Ms. Carter," I said, my voice regaining its strength. "It's been a long time. I need your help." I outlined the situation, carefully choosing my words, laying the groundwork for my counterattack. Ms. Carter listened intently, occasionally interjecting with a pointed question, a shrewd observation. "I understand," she said finally. "We'll take him down. Mrs. your last name. We'll make sure he regrets the day he tried to cross you." A small smile played on my lips. Marcus had awakened a sleeping lioness. He'd assumed I was weak, vulnerable, easy prey. He'd mistaken my quiet dignity for resignation. He'd forgotten the lengths a mother would go to protect what's hers, to safeguard her legacy. "He'll learn," I murmured to myself, a flicker of steel in my eyes. "He'll learn that some things are worth fighting for, and that sometimes the quietest battles are the most devastating." I glanced at the clock. It was almost time for my evening tea. I needed to be rested. The fight was just beginning. I had a feeling tomorrow would be a very interesting day. The wheels were in motion. Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the turmoil inside me. Wednesday afternoon, and I was still reeling from Marcus's threats. "Sell the house, Mother, or I'll take it from you." His words echoed in my ears, sharp and cold. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling. "Eleanor, dear, are you free to talk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Thank goodness she answered on the first ring. "Of course, darling. What's wrong? You sound awful." I poured out the whole sordid story to Eleanor, the betrayal, the threats, the sheer disbelief that my own son could treat me this way. He actually threatened to have me declared incompetent. I choked out, the words catching in my throat. "He said I'm too old to manage my own affairs." Eleanor listened patiently, her silence punctuated by soft murmurs of sympathy. "He wants the house, Eleanor. He's been after it for years, but I never thought he'd stoop this low." I explained how he'd brought up Julian, Eleanor's own fiancé, claiming Julian was a lawyer who could easily draw up the necessary paperwork. He even suggested Julian would do it for free as a family favor. The thought made my stomach churn. Julian was a kind man. I couldn't imagine him ever being involved in such a scheme. "That's outrageous," Eleanor exclaimed, her voice rising in indignation. "Julian would never do something like that. He'd be furious if he knew Marcus was using his name in this way." A small flicker of warmth ignited in my chest. It was good to hear Eleanor's unwavering support. "I know, dear," I sighed. "I just can't believe how manipulative Marcus has become. He even brought up Eleanor's wedding, saying he needed the money from the house to help with the expenses. Can you imagine?" Eleanor was silent for a moment. Then she said, "That's just a ploy, darling. He's trying to guilt you into giving him what he wants." I relayed the most cutting part of Marcus's tirade. He claimed I was living in the past, clinging to a house that was too big for me. He said I should be grateful for his concern. I said, the bitterness clinging to the words. He even suggested I move into some assisted living facility close to him so he could keep an eye on me. The very idea sent shivers down my spine. I told him I wouldn't be bullied. I continued that this house is my home, and I'm not going anywhere. Eleanor's voice hardened. Good for you. Don't let him intimidate you. Then her tone softened. But darling, you can't fight this alone. You need to protect yourself. Her words struck a chord. I'd been so focused on defending my home, I hadn't thought about the legal ramifications. What do you mean, dear? I asked. You need to see a lawyer, Eleanor said firmly. A good one. Someone who can help you navigate this mess and ensure Marcus doesn't take advantage of you. She paused, then added, Actually, I know just the person. A friend of Julian specializes in elder law. He's brilliant and incredibly discreet. The word discreet resonated. I didn't want this whole ugly affair splashed all over town. That sounds promising, I said, a glimmer of hope flickering within me. I'll put you in touch with him, Eleanor assured me. He can advise you on the best course of action. And don't worry about the cost. We'll figure that out later. Her words were a balm to my wounded spirit. I wasn't alone in this fight. Thank you, Eleanor, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You're a true friend. Of course, darling, she replied. Families should support each other, not tear each other down. We chatted for a few more minutes, then said our goodbyes. As I hung up the phone, a sense of resolve settled over me. Marcus thought he could bully me into submission, but he'd underestimated me. I wasn't about to let him walk all over me. I had friends, resources, and more than a few tricks up my sleeve. He wanted a fight. He was going to get one. And I had a feeling this was just the beginning. Something told me that soon, very soon, the tables would turn. I opened a small locked drawer in my desk. Inside, nestled amongst old photographs and letters, was a bank statement. A statement for an account Marcus knew nothing about. An account that held considerably more than the value of this old house. A slow smile spread across my face. He wanted to play games. Let the games begin. Friday morning. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. A peaceful scene shattered by the crisp white envelope I held in my trembling hand. It was from the city, citing potential code violations on my property, overgrown shrubs, peeling paint, a dilapidated fence. My heart hammered against my ribs. This can't be happening, I whispered, sinking into a chair. I knew exactly who was behind this. Marcus, my own son, who just days ago had sat in this very kitchen, demanding I sell my home, threatening to have me declared incompetent if I refused. It's for your own good, Mom, he'd said, his voice dripping with false concern. You can't manage this place anymore. He'd even suggested Eleanor and Julian would be happy to help me find a suitable assisted living facility. The sheer audacity of it still made my blood boil. But this letter, this was a new low. I reread the notice, my stomach churning with a mixture of anger and fear. The specified violations were minor, easily fixable, but the timing was far too convenient. He's trying to force my hand, I muttered, crumpling the paper. He thinks I'll cave under the pressure, sell him the house for a pittance just to make this all go away. I stared out the window, the familiar sight of my garden, my haven. blurring through a film of tears. This house, filled with memories of happier times, was all I had left. I wasn't going to let Marcus take it from me. Not now, not ever. A flicker of defiance ignited within me, replacing the fear with a steely resolve. "He wants a fight," I said aloud, my voice gaining strength. "Fine. He'll get one." I smoothed out the crumpled notice, my mind already racing, formulating a plan. I wouldn't let him see me sweat. I wouldn't let him see how deeply his betrayal had wounded me. Instead, I would play along, letting him think he was winning, lulling him into a false sense of security. I reached for the phone, dialing the number of a local contractor, my voice calm and collected. "Hello, Mr. Henderson. This is Mrs. Davies. I received a notice from the city regarding some minor repairs needed on my property. I'd like to get a quote as soon as possible." I arranged for him to come by the following morning, making a mental note to stage a few extra issues for him to find a leaky faucet, a loose shingle, anything to make the repairs seem more extensive, more costly. Later that day, I made another call, this time to my financial advisor, Mr. Thompson. "I need to discuss some adjustments to my portfolio," I told him, my voice deliberately vague. We spoke for nearly an hour, going over my investments, discussing strategies, exploring options I'd never considered before. "I want to ensure my assets are protected," I emphasized. He assured me he understood, promising to draw up the necessary paperwork. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Mr. Henderson and his crew descended upon my house, hammers pounding, saws buzzing, creating a deliberate illusion of frantic repair work. I even went so far as to confide in Eleanor about the exorbitant costs, lamenting my dwindling finances. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, dear," I sighed dramatically, watching her reaction. She offered empty platitudes, her eyes gleaming with a barely concealed triumph. Julian, ever the dutiful fiancé, patted my hand condescendingly. "Don't worry, Mrs. Davies," he said smoothly. "We'll be here to help you through this." Their feigned concern only fueled my resolve. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I was quietly putting my real plan into action. I was shifting assets, consolidating accounts, creating a financial fortress that Marcus couldn't touch. He thought he was breaking me, but he was inadvertently making me stronger. He thought he was stripping me of my independence, but he was actually empowering me to reclaim it. The day Marcus came to check on the progress of the repairs, I greeted him with a weary sigh. "It's a nightmare, Marcus," I complained, gesturing at the workmen bustling around the property. "This is costing me a fortune. I just don't know what I'm going to do." I allowed a single tear to roll down my cheek, a carefully crafted display of vulnerability. He beamed, his eyes alight with avarice. "Don't you worry, Mom," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "It'll all be over soon." I met his gaze, a faint smile playing on my lips. He had no idea what was coming. He thought he had won. He thought he had me cornered. But he was wrong. So very wrong. I had one final play left to make, a surprise that would leave him utterly speechless. And I couldn't wait to see the look on his face when he realized just how badly he had underestimated his mother. The game, my dear Marcus, was far from over. The phone rang, jarring me from the quiet satisfaction of signing the final document. It was Eleanor. "Mom," she began, her voice laced with a hesitant concern. "Julian and I have been thinking, are you sure you're all right? Marcus called us, ranting about you being unstable and trying to sell the house out from under him." I paused, letting her words hang in the air. "Darling," I said, my voice steady, "Marcus has a very creative interpretation of reality. Everything is perfectly fine. In fact," I added, a small smile playing on my lips, "things are better than fine." I could practically hear her brow furrow through the phone. "What do you mean, Mom?" I didn't elaborate. "You'll see soon enough, sweetheart. Just trust me." I ended the call, a wave of calm washing over me. For weeks, I'd been living under the shadow of Marcus's threats, his insistence that I was becoming senile, his attempts to manipulate me into signing over my home. He'd even gone so far as to threaten legal action, claiming he was acting in my best interests. "You need to be in a care facility, Mom," he'd sneered during one particularly vicious visit. "You can't manage this place anymore. It's for your own good." He wanted my house. He'd made that abundantly clear. He wanted to sell it, pocket the money, and leave me with whatever scraps he deemed appropriate. But Marcus had underestimated me. He'd assumed my quiet demeanor and reluctance to engage in his escalating drama was a sign of weakness, a symptom of the mental decline he so readily proclaimed. He hadn't factored in my quiet resolve, the steel that ran beneath the surface of my apparent fragility. He also hadn't factored in the offshore accounts, the investments I'd carefully cultivated over the years, a safety net I'd kept hidden, even from my own children. These were resources I had intended to use to ensure their futures, a nest egg for their own families. I'd never imagined I would need them to protect myself from one of my own. The lawyer I'd consulted, recommended by a trusted friend, had been discreet and efficient. He'd listened patiently as I laid out the situation, the mounting evidence of Marcus's manipulative tactics, the veiled threats, the blatant attempts to coerce me. "He thinks I'm losing my grip," I'd explained, a flicker of anger in my eyes. "He thinks I'm an easy target." The lawyer, a seasoned professional with a reassuringly calm presence, had simply nodded. "We'll handle this," he'd assured me. "We'll make sure your rights are protected." And he had. He'd meticulously documented every interaction, every phone call, every veiled threat, building a solid case against Marcus's claims. He'd also uncovered some interesting information about Marcus's own financial dealings, information that painted a less than flattering picture of his supposed concern for my well-being. It turned out Marcus was facing significant financial difficulties, a fact he'd conveniently omitted during his pronouncements about my supposed incompetence. The irony wasn't lost on me. The document I'd just signed was a cease and desist order, a legal document that formally warned Marcus against further harassment and any attempts to interfere with my ownership of the house. It also outlined the potential legal consequences he would face if he continued his course of action. More importantly, it included a detailed account of his own financial precariousness, subtly suggesting that any further legal action on his part might invite unwanted scrutiny into his own affairs. It was a gamble, a calculated risk, but I was confident it would be enough to silence him. My phone buzzed again, This time it was Marcus. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Mom, he began, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. I got something from your lawyer. I could hear the tremor in his voice, the sudden realization that he'd miscalculated, that his carefully constructed narrative was crumbling around him. Yes, Marcus, I said, my voice calm and even. I believe you did. He stammered, trying to regain his footing, to find a way to salvage the situation. Tu was just worried about you, Mom. That's all. I understand, Marcus. I replied, the faintest hint of steel entering my voice. But your concern seems to have manifested itself in some rather unconventional ways. I hope this clarifies things for you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, he mumbled something unintelligible and hung up. I placed my phone on the table, a deep sigh escaping my lips. The fight had taken its toll, but I had won. My home was safe, my independence was secure, and Marcus, he'd learned a valuable lesson about underestimating his mother. But the real surprise, the true extent of my victory, was yet to come. They were all about to learn just how much they had underestimated me, and it was going to happen sooner than they thought. The mahogany table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the dull ache in my chest. Marcus, my own son, sat across from me, his lawyer whispering in his ear, "Just sign the papers." "Mother," Marcus said, his voice laced with false concern, "it's for the best." He actually believed I would fall for his charade, that I'd willingly hand over my home, the last piece of my late husband's legacy. He'd underestimated me, my own lawyer, Ms. Diaz, a woman whose sharp gaze could cut through steel, placed a hand on my arm. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said calmly, "are you ready?" I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was time to unveil the truth, to expose the web of lies Marcus had so meticulously spun. "Mr. Caldwell," Ms. Diaz addressed Marcus, her voice echoing in the small room, "you claim your mother is mentally unfit to manage her own affairs. You've presented evidence of erratic behavior, financial mismanagement, and even suggested she's suffering from early-onset dementia." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his lawyer's whispers growing louder. "However, Ms. Diaz continued, her voice rising slightly, "we have evidence that contradicts your claims entirely." She gestured towards a young man sitting beside her, a forensic accountant I'd hired weeks ago. When Marcus's scheme first came to light, "Mr. Evans," Ms. Diaz said, "please explain your findings to the court." Mr. Evans stood, holding a thick folder. "The accusations of financial mismanagement are baseless," he stated clearly. "Mrs. Caldwell's finances are meticulously organized. The supposed erratic behavior documented by Mr. Caldwell consists of fabricated incidents and misinterpreted events, conveniently witnessed only by him." He opened the folder, revealing bank statements, transaction records, even photographs. "Furthermore," Mr. Evans continued, his voice gaining strength, "we have discovered a series of large sums of money transferred from Mrs. Caldwell's accounts into an offshore account belonging to—" He paused, letting the tension build. "Double quote stop Mr. Marcus Caldwell." The color drained from Marcus's face. His lawyer sputtered, trying to interrupt, But Ms. Diaz silenced him with a raised hand. These transfers, Mr. Evans went on, coincide precisely with the times Mr. Caldwell claimed his mother was exhibiting erratic behavior. It appears he was deliberately creating stressful situations to justify his claims of her incompetence, all while siphoning her funds. The room was silent, except for the frantic whispers between Marcus and his now pale lawyer. But that's not all, Ms. Diaz added, her voice like ice. She produced another document, a medical evaluation from a renowned neurologist. This report, she explained, clearly states that Mrs. Caldwell is in perfect mental health. The supposed symptoms of dementia described by Mr. Caldwell are, according to the doctor, a result of the immense stress caused by her son's relentless harassment and unfounded accusations. I looked at Marcus. He avoided my gaze, his face a mask of shame and defeat. The carefully constructed image of the concerned son crumbled before my eyes, revealing the greedy, manipulative man beneath. Mr. Caldwell, Ms. Diaz said, her voice sharp and final, your petition to declare your mother incompetent is denied. Furthermore, she added, a hint of steel in her voice, we will be pursuing legal action against you for elder abuse and financial fraud. Marcus finally looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resentment. Mother, he stammered. You can explain, I think. I interrupted, my voice steady and strong, that you've done quite enough explaining already. I stood up, the weight of weeks of anxiety lifting from my shoulders. I glanced at the mahogany table, the scene of so much anguish, and then at my son, the man I once loved and trusted. This meeting, I said, is over. I turned and walked out of the room, Ms. Diaz close behind. As I stepped into the hallway, I took a deep breath of the fresh air. The city sounds a welcome symphony after the suffocating tension of the courtroom. I had won. I had protected my home, my husband's legacy, and in doing so, I had finally seen my son for who he truly was. The realization was a bittersweet victory, a stark reminder of the fractured bonds that might never heal. But as I looked out at the bustling city, I knew I would rebuild, stronger and more resilient than ever. The house was safe, and so was I. The future remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would face it on my own terms.